Hey, so in this class we're going to finalize our rig and just tidy up a couple of odds and ends. So the first thing we'll do is group and hide all of these blend shapes. Let's select all the brow blend shapes, Control G on the keyboard to group them together, and we'll rename this brow blend shapes. While I have the group selected, I'm going to hold down Control and press H on my keyboard. Control H just turns off visibility. Alright, so now I'll go to my lip sync blend shapes, just drag a box over all of those, Control G to group them, and I'll just name that lip sync blend shapes. Control H on the keyboard to hide it, and I'll drag a box over all my facial expressions to group them together, and I'll name that face expression blend shapes. Control H to hide those. And then the original head that we were duplicating and creating new blend shapes from, and I'll just Control H to hide that as well. And this is the hierarchy that we have all the blend shapes in. Way back when we cut the head from the body, the group is just still named Body Geo, so we're going to rename that to blend shapes. The next thing I'd like to do is add some color to the control curves. Now we don't have to color the control curves, but it does help to add, it really just adds appeal to the look of the rig. It also does serve a function. It just visually makes it a little easier for animators to select the controls when there's some color on them, and it looks pretty. But it has become the industry standard to add color to the control curves. When we select control curves, they're highlighted in green, so I want to avoid changing them to green. And if we shift select controls, you can see that the original selection turns white. So I want to avoid using green or white. To start coloring our control curves, we'll just select one of the curves and we'll go to the attribute editor. I already have it open on a tab on the right here, but if you don't have it open, you can hit Control A. You want to click on Object Display, and under Object Display you'll see another tab called Drawing Overrides. So we want to uncollapse that. So click on Drawing Overrides, and we want to check Enable Overrides. There's a color slider here which we can drag and change the color. So I'll change this one to yellow, and if I just click off and space here to deselect the head control, you can see now it's yellow. I'm going to make all the center of the body controls yellow, and then we'll do a different color for the right arm and leg controls and another color for the left arm and leg controls. So now I'll select the neck, the upper neck control, click Enable Overrides. I'm going to drag this to yellow. You can see now the neck is yellow. And I'm just going to repeat the process for all the controls down the center of the body. Alright, so we have all the main body controls colored yellow. So now I'll work on the right arm and leg controls. And I think I'm going to go with a red color for the right side. You don't want to go with light, dull colors. You want to use really bright colors so that they're easily visible and easier to select. Okay, so now we're going to color the left side. So I think I'll go with the bright blue color like this. So we have our control curves colorized. Now the next thing I want to do when I switch the IK-FK arms, when I'm in FK I want the IK controls to disappear. So I'm just going to move my IK, right now I'm in IK mode, so we'll move the arm down a little bit. We'll select the IK-FK switch, and you can see if you virtual slide you can switch from IK to FK. And we're going to use a set driven key to do this. So let's change our menu set to animation. Under key, let's go to set driven keys, set. With the IK FK control selected, we're going to hit load driver. So that'll be the driver, so we'll highlight that. So the elbow control, we're going to make that disappear when we switch to FK. And we're also going to make the IK hand control disappear when we switch to FK. So let's do the elbow first. We're going to click on load driven. And we're going to select visibility. And since we're already in IK mode, we want to keep that showing, so we're going to key it in IK mode. We'll select the IK-FK control switch and switch it to FK. And then we'll select the elbow control again. And under visibility, we want to type in 0 here to switch it to off, so we don't see it. And then we'll key that again. So now if I select IK-FK switch and I switch back and forth, we'll see the elbow appearing and disappearing. So we'll just leave it in IK for now. Do the same thing with the hand control here. We'll select that, and we have to change our driven, so we'll load driven, select visibility, and key it on, and now we'll switch to FK. Select that IK hand control again, type 0 in under visibility, so it's not showing anymore, and then we'll key that. Then we'll select the IK FK control again just to test it. So if we switch back and forth, we see those two controls disappearing. I'm also going to do it for the forearm twist as well, because that control is for our FK arm. So let's go to FK. We'll select our forearm control and hit load driven. We'll select the visibility and key it on. So it's on for FK. Now let's select our IK FK switch and change it to 1. So now we're back in IK mode. Let's select that forearm shape. We've already keyed it on, so now let's type in 0 under visibility to turn it off. And we'll key that again. So if I switch back and forth now, you can see the controls appearing and disappearing. Now when I'm in IK, you can see that I have the elbow controls are still visible. So let's go back to FK, and I'll select my elbow control. Let's hit load driven. Select visibility and key it. Then we'll go back to IK, select that elbow control and turn it off by typing 0 in, and we'll key that. Now if we switch back and forth, we only see the controls that we want to see for the arm mode that we're in. I'm going to go through and repeat the same process on the left side. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is create a new attribute on the head control so that the animators can choose to hide the face controls if they don't need them. Add attribute. I'm just going to use capitals and call it face controls, and the minimum will be 0 and the maximum will be 1. So we'll just be turning this on and off. And we can see our new attribute here. So now when we select the head control and we can middle mouse button drag or just change 0 to 1, we have our face control popping on and off. I'm going to do the same thing for the eye direction control, the mouth control, and each one of the control curves for the eyebrows and for the mouths. The clusters we're going to leave. We're not going to do that for the clusters because we're going to hide all the deformers. Okay, so all of our face controls turn off when we change face control viz to 0. Alright, so let's close up our set driven key window. We don't need that anymore. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is go through each and every one of these controls and lock and hide the attributes that we don't need for each one. Just so animators don't accidentally move things around. We don't want the animator to move these controls around. Select all the translates, rotates, and scales, and we can even select the visibility, and we can right click over it and go down to lock and hide. So now you don't see it in the channel box anymore. And if you try to move it or rotate it or scale it, you can't. So we're just going to go top to bottom. So let's select the head control. We don't want the animators to scale that control at all. Visibility doesn't need to be there either. So we can just select all those attributes, right click over them, and go to lock and hide selected. And I'm going to do the same thing for each and every control. We don't want to scale these eyebrow controls, but we do want to translate and rotate them. So lock and hide for each one of the brow controls. I'm going to repeat the process for each one of the lip controls. We do want to translate and rotate these, so we're just going to lock and hide the scale and visibility attributes. For the head, we'll leave the translates on just in case we want to translate the head around. They wouldn't do it too much because it deforms in an unusual way, but we'll just leave those attributes available for the animator. So for the shoulder joints, we don't want to translate those and we don't want to scale them either. So lock and hide. If at any time you would change your mind, or when you're rigging, if you want to undo this function, with the control selected, we can go to edit, and under channel control, you can undo what's hidden and what's locked. You can see here we have keyable and locked. Under the keyable tab, we only have the rotates available, and that's what's available in our channel box here. So where did all the other attributes go, the translates and scales? Well, they're in this list in the non-keyable hidden. And we can see that we have our translates here. So say for example I wanted to put those back in the channel box, I can select these and hit this move button, and you can see it puts it back in this list, and now they're available in the channel box. They're still locked, but we can click on the locked tab and we can see that these channels are locked. So if I want them to be unlocked, I can either right click here and choose unlock selected, or you can select them here in this list and move them to the non-locked list. Now I'm going to repeat the same process for all the controls. Alright, so now we want to test how our face controls react when we move the head around. So if I rotate the head up a little bit, so I'll select the face, let's try the blinks. Now we can see that the lids come away from the eyes. That's an undesirable effect. We don't want that. I'll just virtual slide the mouth. We can see that the head goes back to its original position. I don't want that to happen either. So we need to change the deformation order. So I'm going to select the geometry for the whole body. And you have to go up to the top here. Under this little button, we're going to click that and go right to the bottom under all inputs. We want to see all the inputs. You want to have the skin cluster. That's the binding we did of the model to the skeleton. We want that to be at the very top. So go skin cluster, clusters, and then blend shape. So to change the order of these inputs, we can middle mouse button over the name. So here's my skin cluster 1. I'm going to middle mouse button that and move it to the top. Now it doesn't let you put it right to the top, so we're just going to move it here for now. And then we'll put our blend shapes down to the very bottom. So middle mouse button over each blend shape and just move them down. You'll see a little line appear there, just release. And we'll grab this last blend shape and move it down with the other blend shapes and release. And you can see as soon as you do that, everything is fixed here. We have our blink and the smile. So now we can move our head around and everything works properly. Just move it into a different position and test it. Okay, so I can see that my right and left eyebrows aren't going up and down. So for the right and left brow controls, those were blend shapes that we had created. So we're going to go down to the blend shapes. We have 1, 2, and 3. So we're just going to move those around a little bit. I'm just going to open up my blend shapes window. And you can see that my brows are blend shape 1, my lip sync is blend shape 2, and my facial expressions are blend shape 3. And you can see here in my deformation order I have blend shape 3, 2, and 1. I found that the right order for me to put my blend shapes in were 3, 2, and 1. And you want to experiment with this a little bit. I can have my smile at about halfway and still have some of the lip sync blend with it. If you're doing this exactly like I am, that would be the order that you would put those in. But the blend shapes definitely are all at the bottom. Because we created blend shapes for the eyebrows and we also created blend shapes for the facial expressions, the blend shapes for the facial expressions have the eyebrows in their default position. So if we adjust the eyebrows a little here, those are our blend shapes, and we select the mouth, we try to get them into a smile, it puts the eyebrows back in the default position because the blend shape for the smile has the eyebrows at the default position. We can adjust that by painting blend shape weights. So I'm going to set the eyebrows at a value of 10, so that's all the way up. Let's make sure that all of our clusters around the mouth are set to 0, so we're not confusing matters here. Let's turn the smile all the way up to 100%. Hold shift down and press H on all of our hidden blend shapes. Let's just turn them all back on. And I'll go through and name them because they won't show up in the paint blend shapes window. Alright, so now let's go back to our model. We'll select the geometry and we want to go to deform where it says paint weights. We're going to select the blend shape and now we can paint our blend shapes. We can see we have frown, small mouth, cringe, tuck, pucker, and smile. So we want to be able to turn up each blend shape for each facial expression but not include the eyebrows. So since our facial expression blend shapes were blend shape 3, we can see the blend shape 3 attribute here. When we select that, our model turns all white. We're going to use our replace operation and crank the value all the way down to 0 and just paint over the whole eyebrow area. And since we already have the eyebrows turned up to 10, we can see them going back to their shape. So now the smile blend shape is having no impact on this area. I want to be careful not to paint any of the cheek area. Okay, so now he can smile and the eyebrows stay up. We can still move the brows and it doesn't affect the smile. So when we turn up the lip sync shapes, we get the brows coming back to their original shape because all the lip sync heads have the original brows. So our lip sync blend shapes is blend shape 2. So let's just crank up one of the lip sync mouths. And another way to get to our paint blend shape weights tool is just to select the model and right click and go down to paint, arrow over, and then we'll go down to blend shape and you'll see here blend shape 2. So now we have blend shape 2 in the list and these are all the mouth shapes for our second blend shape. Repeat the same process, make sure that we have our replace function checked and the value cranked all the way down to 0. And I already have my eyebrows turned all the way up to 10, so they should be up, but because we have some lip sync turned on, the eyebrows are not moving up. So we're going to replace. This way we'll be able to animate lip sync and the brows independently. Just go through and test each one and make sure those eyebrows stay up. Alright, so we have all that working. I'm just going to go ahead and hide all these blend shapes again. Control H. Alright, so let's move on to the next step. We're going to group and parent everything into one hierarchy. So I need to create a master control that moves the whole character. So we're going to go to curves and surfaces. I'm going to create a circle. You can shape this however you want. Just for the sake of demonstration, I'm just going to leave it as a circle. And I'll go to edit and let's delete the history. Go to modify and freeze transformations. And I'll just name this master control. I'm just going to turn off shape nodes so we don't see all that. I'm going to drag the entire skeleton onto the master control just so it selects everything. And we're also going to drag all the control curves onto the master control. Okay, so the foot controls, I'm going to group them to themselves. Control G, and we'll rename it left foot group. And I'll do the same thing with the right foot. And I'll drag those onto the master control. I'm just going to select all the character's geometry. I'm just shift selecting the body geometry, the eyes, the right and left eye groups, the hair geometry, and I'll find the teeth in here. So we'll select the top nodes of all those and hit Control G. We're going to group all those together and call it geometry. We'll just call it geo. So we'll leave the geo separate. Okay, so let's get those knee controls in there, and we'll just middle mouse button drag that onto the master. So that's all coming along with it. We have our hand controls and our IK, FK controls are all together. We can select both of those and middle mouse button drag them onto the master. I'm just going to switch my arms to IK for a minute. Let's find these elbow controls. So there they are here. So we'll select both of those and middle mouse button drag them to the master. We'll find our hand controls, middle mouse button drag those to the master. Just make sure all that's coming along okay. And we have a couple of nodes in here that we don't need, stuff that we had grouped to some controls earlier, then we can just delete those. So there's one that's called, this is our old master, so I'll just select that and hit delete. These are some empty text nodes that we don't need, we'll delete that. And these are the IK handles for our arms. Let's select both of those and just middle mouse drag it to the master. Alright, so now we just have our blend shapes in here. We can include that in the hierarchy as well, or just leave it off to the side, it doesn't really matter. This is our texture reference, we're going to leave that alone. So we want to make this character scalable. Currently if I try to select the master control and I scale him down, he does scale down. You can see when we get to a certain point, if I zoom in here, you can see that his eyes and teeth don't scale down with him. So we're going to create a scale constraint. We'll just select the master control first, and let's go to the geometry, and we'll select the right eye group, go to constraint and select scale constraint. So now if I scale his master down, you can see that his right eye is fine, and the aim constraint is still working. Or we'll do the same thing with the other eye. So with the master control selected, we'll select the left eye group, and we'll just go to constraint and scale. And I'll do the same thing with the teeth. Select the master, I'll shift select the teeth group, and we'll go to constraint and scale. Now if we scale the character down, he's fully scalable. Alright, so now let's hide all of our clusters. I'm just going to select one of them, hit F on the keyboard. We can just shift select each one of the clusters here if we turn off our select objects. So I can just drag a box over all of these, and then we can hold down Control and tap H on the keyboard so our clusters are hidden. Show all. Let's just show everything now. And I want to hide the skeleton as well. We'll select the core joint, which selects the entire skeleton, and I'll hold down Control and press H. And we want to hide our IK handles too. Show none, and then just show IK handles, just so we get all of them. Drag a box over all those, and Control H. Now we'll go show all again. We don't want any of the deformers, joints, or IK handles showing. The only thing the animator should really see is the polygons and the control curves. So if I select his mouth and go to his smile attribute, we crank that up. It looks pretty good when he smiles, but if I want to exaggerate that more, you can see the smile slider going up in the blend shapes window. Now you can see here there's a value of 1 for each and every one of these blend shapes. When we drag them up, it goes up to 1. We can actually change the value. Say for example if I set it to 2, it exaggerates the smile by quite a bit. Now that's a little too much, I think. So we can increase the values here and drag these up really high and exaggerate them. But say if I bring it up to 1.5, just for a bigger smile, and I keep the smile attribute set to 10, that's our maximum, I can reset the set driven key so that the smile is more exaggerated. For some of them you can go through and tweak the blend shapes a little bit more and just reset the set driven key. Alright, so I'm just going to open the mouth a little bit and let's throw some shaders on the teeth. We can click here to open up our hypershade. Let's use a Fong shader for the teeth. So with that Fong shader selected, I'm just going to rename that teeth. And I'll double click on that to get the attribute editor up. We're going to drag that all the way up to white. And I'm just going to select all the cubes for the teeth. Make sure we don't get the constraint. And I want to deselect the gums here. I just want to get the teeth. Then we can right click over the teeth shader that we just created and choose assign material to selection. So now we have some shiny teeth. And then you can go in the attribute editor for the Fong and adjust some of the specular shading. I'll create a blend material for the gums. So the shader for the tooth is a Fong. It's got a real hard highlight on it, which we want for teeth because they're shiny. The gums have more of a dull highlight on them. That's why we're using a blend. So now we'll go to the attributes for the blend shader, and let's change the color to some kind of red, and then I'll just adjust the saturation and value down here. Let's go with a nice healthy pink color. We'll just select both gums now, and we'll right click and go assign material to selection. And you can see there's a nice highlight on the gums there. Alright, so we have some color on the teeth, gums, and tongue. Let's just crank up the cringe. You can see his teeth. It's looking pretty good. And this character is about ready for animation. The last thing I want to do is just go through and refine all the weight painting that we did earlier. Because we did add a core joint to the center. We added a new joint, so that joint will need to be painted out. So now we can just start posing the character, getting the character into different poses, and just seeing where he needs improvement. Alright, so we have them all zeroed out. You can see he's not too happy about not having clavicle controls. Alright, so we're going to go to our curves and surfaces shelf. Let's just hit the circle. There's always going to be some oversights in rigging. And for the clavicle controls, I like to make something that looks sort of like a moon shape. And we don't want that all jumbled up with the other controls around it, so I'm just going to shrink that right down. And I'm going to Control D to duplicate it. We'll bring one to the other side. Let's go to the front view and just make sure they're relatively even. Delete by type, history, freeze transformations. Now we want to snap the pivot to the clavicle joint. Tap D on the keyboard to get into pivot mode. And I'm going to hold down V and snap it to our clavicle joint. And then tap D to get back out of pivot mode. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Alright, now we'll just parent constrain these to the joints. So there we have our clavicle controls now. Alright, so our rig is pretty much done, with the exception of going through and smoothing out some of the skin weighting. Thanks for joining me for character rigging. I hope you learned a lot.